talk to a lot of people during the week, and they're going through struggles and things like that. What can I do to lift their spirits? I believe there's enough pushing people down already. So when people leave one of our services or read one of my books, I want them to leave saying, you know what, I can be better, I can rise higher. So I think it's just trying to speak to somebody one-on-one, not speaking down to them. I mean, I was raised my father was a great minister. He didn't speak down to people. But in the old days, church, you know, you went to church to know what you're doing wrong. And you left there thinking, oh, man, I am so guilty. I can't do right. And you're pushed down. But I see it just the opposite. I want people to leave saying, you know what, I can be a better father this week. I can be a better employee. I can accomplish my dream. So, I don't know, it's something about just speaking to, you know, the seeds of greatness that God's placed in all of us.
So then let me ask you a question, because when you came on Piers Morgan's show a while ago, he asked you about homosexuality, Christianity, homosexuality, and almost every time we have a pastor on, it's a conversation we have. And you are known for these uplifting ceremony services, and you talk to a lot of, it's like 45,000 people who attend. And I always wonder, when you say homosexuality is a sin, and there's a bunch of people who clearly are gay who are in your church, you're calling them sinners. I mean, that...
Well, so that
it's the opposite of uplifting, I would think.
It does, but one, I don't necessarily focus on that. I only talk about that on the interviews. The other thing, too, is it seems like in Christianity sometimes we categorize sin. I mean, pride is a sin. Being critical is a sin. Being negative is a sin. The Scripture even says anything that is not of faith is a sin.
We're all sinners? You'd say we're all sinners?
Yeah, and so I think we say, okay,
homosexuality is not so bad, right?
Well, I don't think it's God's best. Neither do I think, you know,
no one is God's best,
no,
right?
We're all growing.
I mean, so don't you think, though, that with the country struggling with increasing acceptance of all its citizens, and you're for basic fairness for everybody, that in situations where, like, we're trying to pass these marriage equality bills in certain states now, that you have an important voice to lend to that, especially to kids who are maybe worried about who they are and where they fit in the community?
Well, you know, I think I have an important voice, but I think I've been good. I think part of my, if you want to call it success, is I've stayed in my lane, and my lane is lifting people's spirits, and there are issues that good Bible-believing people see on both sides of the fence. But, you know,
So you would say to gay young people that, you know, do what you feel is comfortable, yes?
You know, I would say do what I feel like the Scripture says. I don't think being...
Well, and there's a big debate about what Scripture says, right?
It is. And so
okay, that's good.
Well, but I'm lost, though. So, but when you say, you would say the Scripture says homosexuality is a sin.
Exactly.
So then, so this is what I'm trying to understand. I go to church regularly, but I'm not so strong on the Bible, so you'll have to walk me through some of this. And there's some pastors who disagree. They say the Scriptures don't defend that, and Jesus didn't weigh in on homosexuality. So my question is, when you're talking to your 45,000 people in your service, and some of them are gay, you're saying to them, you're a sinner.
Well, Soledad, first off, in my services, I don't cover all these issues that we talk about here.
I get that, but I mean, would you make it clear that you think that homosexuality is a sin?
When I read the Scripture, that's what I believe, that the Scripture condemns it or says it's a sin. But it also says that, you know, lying is, and that being prideful is.
Right, so then you shouldn't lie. But for people who are gay, you're saying, so then you shouldn't be gay? That's why I'm getting confused.
I think that's I think that's the big debate, and the Scripture says you've got to work out your own salvation.
You think you can choose to be gay or not gay? You think you choose to be straight?
No, I know I have not chosen to be straight. I feel like that's who I am.
So how could I choose to be gay?
One question at a time.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think...
I'm trying to be respectful. I mean, I'm a big admirer of your work. I think you're trying to lift people up, you know?
I am, and I don't understand all those issues, and so, you know, I try to stick on the issues that I do understand. And I know this, I'm for everybody. I'm not for pushing people down. Obviously, I've watched the story on bullying and stuff, other things like that comes from it. So I don't know where the fine line is, but I do try to stay in my lane and, you know, lift people's spirits.
I'm going to try some of these affirmations. I got to tell you, I don't believe it. I don't believe it works. I really don't, but if these two tell me it's going to work, and you do,
you have a neurological...
We've got to take a break.
I know. Spiritual evidence here.
So I'm going to try it for a week. I won't give it 31 days, but I'll do 7, and we'll see how it goes. Thank you for joining us this morning. The book is called I Declare 31 Promises to Speak Over Your Life. We're back in just a moment. Stay with us.